I didn't argue when my mother handed me a list of chores like I was a hired maid. I just stared at the last line. Don't forget your place in this house. Because she had no idea what I had already found. And what I was about to do next would change everything. By the time the sun went down that evening, my hands were trembling. Not from exhaustion. From something much worse. Because that afternoon, while cleaning their bedroom like I always did, I had opened a drawer I was never meant to see. And inside it was a document with my name on it. But not in the way you'd expect. That's when everything started to unravel. You're probably wondering how it got this far. How a grown woman in her 60s ended up living like a servant in her own parents' home. I used to ask myself the same question. My name is Meera. I'm 68 years old. And for most of my life, I believed family meant sacrifice. I was the eldest of three. When my father's business failed, I left college to support everyone. I worked 2 jobs, paid my siblings' tuition, covered hospital bills when my mother fell sick. I gave everything without hesitation, because that's what family does, right? But I didn't know the cost of that loyalty yet. Years passed. My siblings got married, built their own lives, moved into comfortable homes. And me? I stayed. Because my parents said they needed me. You're the only one we can rely on, my mother would say. And I believed her. I always believed her. That was my first mistake. At first, it didn't feel like servitude. It felt like duty. But slowly things began to change. Can you clean the kitchen again? My mother would say. It wasn't done properly. You're home all day anyway, my father added once. So, at least make yourself useful. I wasn't home all day. I had retired after decades of work. But to them, I was just available, convenient, disposable. The requests became expectations. The expectations became demands. And the demands became rules. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, ran errands, even massaged my mother's feet every night. Not once did they ask how I was doing. Not once. But the worst part wasn't the work. It was what they said when others visited. This is our daughter, my father would say with a chuckle. She never married. So she stays with us and helps around. Helps. That word used to sting. Because it wasn't help anymore. It was control. And I was starting to feel it. One evening, my younger brother came to visit. He walked into the kitchen while I was scrubbing dishes. He didn't even greet me. Just opened the fridge and said, "Still doing all this?" I smiled weakly. "Someone has to." He laughed. "Yeah, because you've got nothing else." That was the moment something inside me cracked. But I stayed silent. Because I still didn't know the truth. Weeks later, everything changed. And it happened by accident. My mother asked me to clean their bedroom. As usual, dust shelves, organize clothes, wipe down the dresser. Routine. Predictable. Safe. Or so I thought. I was folding my father's shirts when I noticed the drawer slightly open. It wasn't normally like that. And something inside me whispered, "Look, I shouldn't have." But I did. And that's when I saw it. A file, neatly tucked beneath some papers, with a label that made my heart stop. Inheritance distribution. My hands froze. Why was my name on it? Why had no one told me? And why did I feel like I wasn't supposed to see this? I opened it slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear. Inside were legal documents. Signed, stamped, finalized. I scanned the pages. And what I read didn't just hurt me. It rewrote everything I believed about my family. The house, the land, the savings, everything had already been divided. Years ago, my brother and sister received almost everything. And me, I was assigned a small monthly allowance, listed under a category that made my chest tighten. Dependent care support. Dependent care support. I wasn't their daughter. I was their responsibility, their obligation, their servant. But that wasn't the worst part. Not even close. At the bottom of the document was a clause, a condition, something that changed everything. If Meera continues to reside in the family home and provide household support, the allowance will remain active. My breath caught. So that was it. I wasn't staying out of love. I was being kept, maintained, used. And suddenly, everything made sense. The rules, the control, the constant reminders of my place. It wasn't emotional. It was contractual. And that's when I realized they had made a terrible mistake, because they thought I would never find out. That night, I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled, served dinner, massaged my mother's feet, just like always. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in decades, I wasn't obedient. I was aware. And awareness is a dangerous thing. The next morning, I made a phone call, one I should have made years ago, to an old friend, a lawyer. When he answered, I said only one sentence. I think my family has been using me. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "Come see me. Bring everything you found." And that's when the real story began. What I learned in that office shocked even me, because those documents, they weren't as airtight as my parents believed. In fact, they had overlooked something critical, something that gave me power. And once I understood it, I knew exactly what I had to do next. But I didn't rush. I didn't expose them immediately. No. I waited, because timing is everything. A week later, my siblings returned. All of them, for what they called a family discussion. I already knew what it was about. They wanted to finalize things, make everything official, lock me into my role, forever. We sat in the living room. My father cleared his throat. "We've made arrangements for the future," he said. "It's best for everyone." I nodded. "Of course." My sister smiled. "You'll be taken care of, don't worry." Taken care of. Like I was a burden. Then my brother added, "As long as you continue helping here, everything stays smooth." There it was again. The condition. The leash. I looked at each of them. Calm. Silent. And then I said, "I know about the inheritance." The room froze. My mother's face went pale. My father stiffened. "Where did you hear that?" he asked sharply. I smiled. "Does it matter?" The silence grew heavier. Then my brother laughed nervously. "It's just paperwork. Nothing for you to worry about." That's when I leaned forward and said the words they never expected. I spoke to a lawyer. Everything changed. The confidence in their faces faded. "What lawyer?" my father demanded. I placed a folder on the table. "My lawyer." And as I opened it, their entire world began to shift. Because the one thing they forgot was that I had paid for everything once, and that history leaves traces. What happened next, they never saw coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being controlled. I was the one in control. The quietest people are often the strongest, because they've already survived the worst. And they know exactly when to stop being silent. Continuation, 1,500 plus words. The moment I opened that folder, no one spoke. Not my father, not my mother, not even my brother, who always had something to say. Because inside that folder was something they never expected me to have. Proof. "You see," I said quietly, sliding the papers across the table, "before your business failed, Appa, you transferred some assets." My father's jaw tightened. "That was years ago," he snapped. "It has nothing to do with this." I nodded slowly. That's what I thought too, until I saw whose name those assets were transferred to. My sister leaned forward. My brother frowned. My mother looked confused. Then my father said more quietly this time, "Enough, Meera." But I didn't stop, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. "The land in Mysore," I continued. "The fixed deposits. The old house registration." I tapped the paper gently. "They weren't transferred to you, Anna, or you, Kavya." I paused and looked directly at my father. "They were transferred to me." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. My brother shook his head. "That's not possible." I slid the document toward him. "Read it." His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. My sister leaned in. My mother covered her mouth. And my father? He didn't move, because he already knew. "That was temporary," he said finally. His voice was low now. "Controlled." but it was never meant to stay that way. I tilted my head, but it did. That's when everything shifted, because those documents, they weren't just old papers. They were still legally valid, and more importantly, they had never been reversed, which meant one thing: the house we were sitting in, the land they divided, the assets they distributed, were never fully theirs to give away. They were mine. But I didn't say it like that. Not yet, because I wanted them to understand slowly, feel it, the same way I had felt their betrayal. You made plans without telling me, I said softly. You decided my life without asking me. My mother's voice shook. We did what was best for the family. I looked at her. Was it? She couldn't answer. My brother slammed the paper down. This doesn't change anything. I turned to him. It changes everything. Another silence. Then my father stood up. You're misunderstanding the situation. No, I said calmly. For the first time, I understand it perfectly. And that's when I did something they never expected. I stood up too. Slowly. Steadily. Without anger. I won't be staying here anymore. My mother gasped. What do you mean? I looked around the room. At the walls I had cleaned. The floors I had scrubbed. The house I had silently served for years. I mean, I'm done. My brother scoffed. And where will you go? I smiled slightly. That's not your concern. But inside, I already knew, because my lawyer had told me something else. Something even more important. If those assets are still legally yours, he had said, you don't need to ask anyone for permission anymore. That sentence changed everything. The next few days were quiet. Unnaturally quiet. No one gave me orders. No one criticized me. No one even looked me in the eye. But I could feel it. The tension. The fear. Because now, they knew. And they didn't know what I would do next. Neither did I. At least, not at first. But clarity has a strange way of arriving when you finally stop being controlled. On the fourth day, I made another decision. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But out of dignity. I went back to my lawyer, sat across from him, and said, I don't want to fight them. He raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I took a deep breath. I want what's fair. He leaned back. And what does fair look like to you? That question stayed with me longer than I expected, because for years, I had accepted unfairness as normal. So what was fair? Was it taking everything back? Was it exposing them? Was it walking away? Or was it something else entirely? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, listening to the silence of a house that never truly felt like home. And I asked myself one simple question. What do I really want? Not what they wanted. Not what society expected. But what I wanted. And the answer surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. The next morning, I returned to the living room. They were all there, waiting, as if they knew something was coming. I stood in front of them, calm, clear, certain. I've made a decision, I said. No one interrupted. I'm not going to challenge the inheritance. My sister exhaled in relief. My brother leaned back. My mother closed her eyes. But my father watched me closely, because he knew there was more. There's just one condition, I continued. There it was. The shift. My brother frowned. What condition? I met his eyes. I leave this house today and no one contacts me again. Silence. What? My mother whispered. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't show anger. I've given this family everything, I said. My time. My youth. My life. I paused. And in return, you gave me a role. Not a daughter. Not an equal. A role. I'm done playing it. My mother started crying. You can't just leave like this, she said. I looked at her. Gently. I already have. That's when my father finally spoke. And the assets, he asked. I held his gaze. They stay where they are. Another pause. But understand this. I stepped closer. I'm choosing to walk away. Not because I have nothing, but because I finally know my worth. That sentence, changed the room. Because power isn't always about taking. Sometimes, it's about choosing not to. I went to my room, packed a small bag. Not much, just what I needed. Clothes, a few photographs, and something else. The original documents. Not to use, not to fight, but to remind myself of what I had survived. As I walked toward the door, no one stopped me. Not my brother, not my sister, and not even my father. But just as I reached the gate, I heard her voice. Meera. I turned. My mother stood there, tears in her eyes. For a moment, I saw the woman who had raised me, not the one who had controlled me. Will you come back? She asked softly. And for a second, I almost said yes. Old habits, old emotions, old wounds. But then I remembered the list. Don't forget your place in this house. I looked at her and said, I finally found my place. Then I left. It's been 3 years since that day. I live in a small apartment now. Quiet, peaceful, mine. I cook when I want, sleep when I want, sit in silence without being told I'm wasting time. Sometimes people ask me, don't you miss your family? And I always pause before answering. Because the truth is, I don't miss what they made me. I miss what I thought we were. But that version of us never really existed. And that's something many people don't understand. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And without respect, there is no relationship. Only control. Only expectation. Only quiet suffering. But here's what I've learned. You can endure a lot in silence. You can sacrifice. You can give. You can love people who don't love you the same way. But the moment you see the truth, you have a choice. Stay or walk away. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away without taking anything. Because peace is worth more than property. And dignity is something no one should ever have to earn. So if you're listening to this, and something inside you feels familiar, ask yourself one question. Am I staying out of love or out of habit? Because the answer to that question might just change your life. I know it changed mine.